everyone, and welcome to Truck Racing 101 Video 1 Truck Driving Basics. In this lesson we'll cover basic racing lines on the flat, oval, and short track surfaces. We'll be looking at pit entry and how to safely get onto pit road. Next, we'll be looking at pit exit and how to properly use your F3 key and whatnot to exit the pits. Then we'll be looking at focal points and what you should be looking at while driving on the racetrack. And finally, we'll be looking at crash avoidance and more or less how to avoid wrecking your truck on the racetrack. So without further ado, let's get on to the lessons at hand. Alright, the first thing we're going to be looking at is a single lap on a flat track, that flat track being the Milwaukee Mile. So as you see the video fade in now, there's a couple of things I want you to look at while watching this part of the video. First is how I get into the corners, only applying just enough brake to get the car to turn into the corners. The second thing that you need to look at is how I slowly roll into the throttle coming out of the corner and how I roll most of the corner in order to prevent the car from going snap loose on corner exit. The other thing you should be looking at, and go back if you need to, is my steering as I turn the car through the corners. Next, we're going to move on to short tracks and how to properly drive a short track for best success. So, as we're watching and as the video fades in again, here's a couple laps at a short track now. You'll notice going into the corners you're more or less doing the same thing you would on any other track, like the flat tracks. A little bit of brake, get the car down. The difference is you're going to see that unlike a flat track where you'll try and roll the car through much of the corner, you're basically trying to stay as close to full throttle as possible through the corner of a short track. The only major difference being that especially early on you can get away with this, but later on you'll have to feather and roll into the throttle a little bit more as the tires lose grip. But you'll notice early on here in these laps I'm actually just burping the throttle in order to stop the car from over-rotating under throttle. The only other thing that you should be looking for is in the steering. You'll notice that unlike the flat tracks where you'll tend to counter steer as you exit the corner, you actually will be tending to have to counter steer a little bit more as you come onto the straightaways. Finally now, we'll move on to the 1.5 mile speedways, also known as cookie cutters by most. As the video fades in here once again, there's a couple of real key things to be looking for. Number one, notice the steering input is much different than the flat and short tracks. You will be using far less steering input typically on both corner entry, during the corner, and on corner exit. There's a huge emphasis on using small, precise movements on these tracks, as the trucks tend to do what most people call ice skating. The other thing to notice is that on corner entry and on corner exit, I'm being much smoother on the throttle than you typically see on short tracks. Now that we got some basic lines, now we're going to look at pit entry. Pit entry you would think is pretty self-explanatory, but at times can be much more difficult than you think. The first thing you'll notice is me both typing and then chatting to let my competitors know that I am pitting. The next thing you'll notice is that I make sure I slow down before corner exit just a little bit to make sure I can get slowed down enough to make a nice, comfortable pit entry. If you mess this up and try and drive too hard into the pits, this next shot is more likely than not what is going to happen to you. So I highly suggest in practice sessions before every race you go in there and practice getting into pit road. Now we're going to move on to looking at pit exit. As the video fades in once again, you'll notice I'm patiently waiting here for my pit stop to finish. You also notice that I quickly switch to the F3 screen. This allows me to see oncoming traffic as I now begin to exit the pits. Be careful to maintain my pit speed and to also make sure that I'm not exiting past the yellow line and waiting for the blend line on the backstretch and easing into the throttle as I exit. The next very important thing I'm going to talk about is focal points. Focal points are very useful visual markers on the racetrack to help you drive better. Some very important focal points would be the apron line, which you can use to help you with the orientation of your car. Lines on the racetrack, which are very useful for knowing when to get in and out of the gas on corner entry and exit. And finally is wall markers, which can be very valuable in knowing when to slow when you are going to pit. So practice at each racetrack, learn the different focal points that you can use to your advantage. The final part of this lesson that we're going to look at is how to avoid crashes. The first thing we're going to look at, which should fade in a moment here, is making an improper corner entry into a corner. This normally done by over-braking or oversteering into the corner. This problem can be corrected in two ways. The first way, if you're having a braking issue, is to go into the game's garage options, click on chassis, and adjust your brake bias in order to better orientate the car based on how you brake on turn entry. The second way is quite simply to practice driving the corners and not drive too hard into the corner so that you spin the car. The next thing we're going to look at is an improper corner exit. This is typically done when your car is pushing, and rather than getting off the gas and letting the car make the corner and easing back into the throttle, people will tend to hold into the throttle, try and make the turn, which inevitably results in a push-loose condition where you snap the car off the corner. Alright, now the final thing we're going to look at today in this lesson is that of recovering the car when it hits the apron. In this first video, you notice I drive the car into the corner, flip the apron, and wreck the car. In the second video, which will be coming up in 1 second, you will be able to see how to recover the car and save yourself from that fate. As you notice, I drive into the corner, I hit the apron, but this time, unlike the last time, I let off the gas and notice how I steer in order to recover the car and continue racing. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this lesson. Hopefully we'll be doing more in the future. And until next time, I bid you all adieu. Good luck and good racing.
The road is fucking hard. The road is fucking tough. There's no question that it is rough and stuff. It's the fucking road, my friend, but it's the only road I know. When I'm lunching on a tasty boosh,